Welcome back, bow hunters. This is Ron with Stay Sharp Guide. As we get closer to launching our newest guide, The Answer, I'm going to be talking today about sharpening traditional heads. My roots are with traditional archery. That's how I started. I count among my most memorable hunts deer and bear that I've taken with a homemade longbow, homemade arrows, homemade broadheads, homemade everything. Matter of fact, this is the last bear that I took with an all homemade setup. Bow, arrow, broadheads, everything was homemade. But a lot of traditional heads have stamped in bleeders that you can't remove. They are integral to the head itself, which poses some challenges in how do you sharpen them. Certainly no rolling guide can sharpen it because you're always going to be eroding away or scraping away that stamped in bleeders, and there's a lot of really great traditional heads out there that have that feature. And in this video we're going to cover how to use our new guide, The Answer, to sharpen those, to get around that bleeder. So one very popular is the Delta. This is the, I believe, the Escalate from Zwickey. So let's do a pre-sharpening check. Now these heads are from my personal collection. I'm a member of the American Broadhead Collecting Club. Yes, that's a thing. And we recognize thousands of heads, catalog them, document them, and these are from my personal collection of over 500 heads. And this one has been sitting around in the case for years, as you can tell by the blade edge. It's pretty darn dull, but let's see how dull. It's nice and rusty. Over 1,000. That is an incredibly dull head. I couldn't cut myself if I wanted to. That probably represents the most dull head that I'll ever work with in any of my videos. So how are we going to sharpen a head with integral bleeders? Well, we're going to use our The Answer guide, which will come with the base. Will come with a short section of carbon arrow with an insert so you can screw your heads on. It will come with 4 grits of diamond, 400, 800, 1200, 2000, but you will also be able to buff, and I'll show that as well. And it comes with our diamond holder. Now this head is incredibly rusty and is incredibly dull, so we're going to have to start with our 400 grit plate. The grit holder has 3 dots on one side, no dots on the other. You will slide your diamond plate in from the side with 3 dots. After playing around with and looking at this head, it's showing me that the best hole to sharpen this bottom side is way out here, and I need to do that so I can miss the bleeder. So when I sharpen this side of the blade, I'll use this hole. When I sharpen the other side of the blade, I will use that hole. And since I don't have to move this head once I've got it in place to sharpen the other side, I will use that hole for this side and this hole for this side, and we should be able to sharpen the bleeders. Most of these heads, the bleeders aren't really sharpened. They're stamped, they're painted. There's no real cutting edge on there. I contend that would probably score in the 2000s for a score. But I'm going to start with 400 grit. Again, I'm going to be in this hole. And I still have to contend with the bleeder because it is going to kind of be in my way. This is a curved head, so I have to sort of rock it as I go, but I'm maintaining contact throughout. I'm getting a lot of rust on that plate. And it's just a matter of finesse to work around that bleeder. Now this one also has a blunted, flattened tip that we are going to hopefully fix. Again, I'm in this hole. And depending on which traditional head you've got with the stamped in bleeders, you get to play around with the hole that matches the bevel angle that you like the most. We give you quite a few options. Not only do we give you hole options for one side of the blade, we give you arrow insertion depth, which can change it. Now, for this Escalade, I'm at 1 7/8 to the outside of the insert. But you will play around with to find the optimum for you. Now, this is going to take some time. And rather than make this video very long, I'm going to go at 400 grit until I get a burr on this side, and then I'll flip it and I'll get a burr on the other side. And I'll come back and talk about the burr, so stay tuned. As I sharpen this, getting my second burr, I think about the comment I made that this is a traditional broadhead. Well, if you put this on a compound bow or even a crossbow, any bow, this will be an incredibly lethal head. This is one of the oldest designs out there. There's a Zwickey line of heads, so it's not just a traditional broadhead. So I shouldn't have labeled it as such. Now, as I'm doing this with 400 grit to get my second burr, I'm giving it a backward stroke to avoid hitting that bleeder, but I certainly can do a forward stroke as well. You just have to be really conscious not to jam into that unseen bleeder on the bottom side. But this stroke direction is reminiscent of old school filing a broadhead like this, as Fred Bear or Roy Case would do. They would file it in this direction. Certainly they had to miss the bleeder, but they would just use one file, one grit, and get this jagged, toothy edge and call it good enough. They might strop it, but that would be about it. Here, you have the ability to go through 5 different grits. All right, let's look for the burr. The paper should flex and catch on the blade. That means I've pushed a burr to this side, and you can see it's doing that. It's flexing, and then if I push hard enough, it pops off. So you want to do that on the entire edge. Make sure you get a burr on one side, then you need to get a burr on the other side. So we were in this hole. I'm going to now erase that burr. Now I find that it's actually comfortable holding it by the head. The unsharpened blade, after you sharpened one, you might want to put tape on that side just so you aren't holding a sharp edge. But now that I've got a burr on one side, I'll break it off and then I'll switch over to the other side and make sure I get rid of that burr before I go on to 800 grit. Now, anybody familiar with this line of head knows that it's a spot welded laminated head, meaning it's got double thickness of metal here in the front, single thickness in the back, so that's why you see this shape the way it is. And we have repaired half of the tip. Now if we would sharpen this other side, we would come back to a point. Once we would sharpen this side, we would come back to a point. But now we have done 400 grit. Remember those 3 dots in the holder, lift the diamonds out from there. And I will insert 800 grit. And the process will be the same. I will go into that hole. In this case, I can hold it right by the blade. And I can stroke until I get a burr on this side at 800. when I get a burr, now it's going to be much faster since the first burr takes the longest and I had a lot of rust to get through. The first burr is your longest burr to get. It takes the longest time to get. Each burr after that will take far less. But I will sharpen at 800, get 2 burrs, 1200, get 2 burrs, 2000, get 2 burrs, and then we will talk about the buffing stage next, and we'll see how sharp we got it. So rather than making you watch me do every grit, because it's going to be the same, I will edit that and I will come back at 2000 grit. I mentioned file sharpening earlier. When you have a 4-blade head like this with a bleeder that can't be removed, file sharpening is one way. That's freehand. Another method is using a rada or other V-style drag-through device. I've been a custom knife maker since 1982. In knife making circles, the rada or other V-style drag-through sharpeners, they're known as edge destroyers because the damage they do tearing up and making a jagged edge, it's just unbelievable what that edge looks like when you look at it under a microscope. You can't buff away that jagged, torn edge. So I did a video where I used a 2-blade version of the Zwickey, and I sharpened 3 of them. One with our rolling guide because it didn't have bleeders, one with a file, and one with a rada style drag through sharpener. I looked at all 3 edges under the microscope. I'll post a link to that video so you can see what those drag through sharpeners do to an edge. Same thing with a file. You can't buff away that mess that it creates. Here we're using 4 grits of diamond and then buffing. So I've gone back and forth, got 2 burrs, and now while I've been talking I've been doing burr breaking at 2000. Now we're going to buff, but we're not only going to buff, we are going to clean the diamonds. You can do this at every grit, but when you buff at 2000 because it's your smoothest plate. So put on 3/4 inch wide freezer tape or blue painter's tape. Now when you put it on, it's a nice cream color, but as I press that adhesive in, you can see how dark it gets. I can use a nail. I prefer this wooden stick where I really push the adhesive into the diamonds. And you're going to see what's going to happen when we peel this up at the end. This is how we clean our diamond plates. You can do this at every one of the grits to clean them. Pull that debris that gets trapped down in those crevices. But we also want it nice and smooth for buffing compound. So put the buffing compound on. Never put buffing compound on a diamond plate without tape. If you do that, you will destroy that plate. There's nothing that will save it. Always put down tape first. Now we're going to be back in this same hole. Buffing is a backward only motion. I don't want to come forward and risk cutting the tape or cutting the buffing compound off of the tape. So I will use a backward stroke, and immediately you can see that green buffing compound is turning darker gray as it polishes that edge. And we're trying to polish away any burr that we had on there at 2000 grit. And we'll polish on one side, then we will flip it over, go in the same hole. We will polish on this side. And what we're doing is we're taking that final burr from 2000 and we're really buffing it away. We're polishing that burr off. And it's the reason that barbers that sharpen straight razors for shaving strop or buff that edge to make it super sharp. That's what we're doing here, and then we're alternating this as well, so we push that stropped burr from one side to another. That's really getting dark. And you can see the sort of edge that I'm producing. No file or Rada style sharpener will produce a scalpel's edge like 4 grits of diamond and then buffing. And this is a step you don't have to worry about overdoing because it's not removing so much metal as it is polishing that edge. So just in the little while that we've been talking, I've polished this edge. Let me get a paper towel here, and we're going to wipe this off. And we're going to look at this edge. Now, I didn't strop nearly as much as I normally would. So let's just look at where we are so far. Now, you want to talk about an edge that's super sharp and hunt ready. You can see my reflection of the camera in that edge. Now, I can strop a lot more, which is only going to make it sharper, but let's have a look at where we are so far. I know we were over 1,000 with our very rusty edge that we started with. Let's see where we are so far. $124. I'm going to buff some more, and then I'm going to come back and we're going to look at it again and see if I did any improvement. I spent a few minutes more buffing, and again, you only want to do a few strokes once you get to the end, pushing that stropping burr over from one side to another. Alrighty, let's clean that edge up, not cut ourselves. That is the edge that we produced. Let's see if we did anything better for our edge. $108. $108 is a very good score. I contend I could probably get below 100 with more stropping. Now, that gauge is one way to test sharpness, but everybody asks, will it shave? Will it shave? I mean, that's important. Does it shave? Let's see. We'll pick a fresh spot right here. It will shave. If I did that for all my videos, I'd have no hair left. When it comes time to sharpen the other side, I was a fan of holding the blade. So you can still do that, but let's be smart and let's take some tape and cover that, right? Cover both sides. Put a couple layers on there protect yourself while you're sharpening. If it's your desire to hold by the blade, certainly tape it. All right. Now, we talked about plate cleaning. Let's look at that very dark gray buffing compound that's on there. We're going to clean this plate now simply by lifting the tape back upon itself. We'll flip it right over on top of itself and slowly pull. And what is on that tape used to be in the plate. And our plate is now clean. So when your plates stop cutting, it's not that they're wore out, it's that all the little potholes between the diamond grits have been so filled with debris that the debris is at the same height as the diamond plates. So every plate can be cleaned with tape, blue painter's tape or white tape like I used, but only use the 2000 grit for buffing. It's our smoothest. Next, let's look at these little bleeders. I'll just put an 800 grit in here for now. So the bleeders that are on here aren't sharpened at all. They are literally just painted metal. You could not cut yourself if you tried, but let's sharpen them. I mean, they're there. In this case, I would use the middle hole. I'm going to hold the guide now instead of the blade. See how I'm laying that blade on there? Let's just give it a few strokes at 800 grit. Certainly I would get done faster at 400 grit. Now first I have to power through that paint that's on there before I can even get to metal. Now let's look at what we're doing. Clean that off. All right, so that's one side. Again, we're going to go into this, at least for this head, that hole. And lay that blade flat. So that hole lends itself to a good bevel angle. I could certainly go to another hole. I could be steeper if I so chose. Steeper angles are stronger angles. And in very little time I can see I've got a burr. I can see that debris on there. So this is one side that we sharpened. There's the other side, as opposed to just blunt, flat, painted metal. So now your bleeders will actually be cutting. So there again, go through all the grits, buff if you want, and then you'll actually have a honest to goodness 4-blade head instead of a 2-blade head with blunt painted bleeders. I think this is superior to that. Now, if you sharpen a lot of different heads, maybe you want to put a little mark on here so that you set this index to the same depth each time so you don't have to measure. Or take a little piece of tape, set it right on there, right Zwickey Escalate on there. If you have a bunch of carbon shafts laying around and you do a lot of different broadheads, just cut a 6-inch length, that's all we're supplying with an insert in it, and mark that shaft for escalates. Mark the next shaft for bear. Mark the next shaft for, some single bevel that you like. There's another tip. If you find that, man, he didn't supply a hole exactly where I would like it, drill a hole. Slip a drill bit in here until it's a size that you like. Maybe you want a hole right here. Drill a hole in it. It's a plastic guide. You're not going to hurt my feelings by doing that. But because this is a 4-blade head, I lined up one of the main blades with this key right here. But as you'll notice, we've got 4 indexers here, 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 and here. I don't have to change a thing now to switch over to this side and sharpen. I can simply go to 400 grit, slip it into this hole, and immediately begin sharpening this other side without making any changes at all. But again, make sure you tape up that because we've proven that to be very sharp. Once we would sharpen this other side, we'd be back to a pointy tip meeting in the middle instead of what we started with, that broken, blunted tip. All right, so there you go. That's sharpening any of these 4-bladed heads with bleeders using the Stay Sharp The Answer. Now, in all of our videos that we've been doing as we roll out the answer, we've been doing a giveaway, and this will be no different. So in this video, if you comment, we'd love it if you would like it and subscribe to our channel. That'd be fantastic. But simply commenting in this video, you are going to get a 3-pack of brand new Zwickey Delta 4-blade heads. So all you have to do is comment in this video, and we will pick one lucky winner who will get that pack of Deltas. Anyway, that's the Escalate sharpened with the answer. Thanks for watching.